The next question is how to flatten a two-dimensional array. Now the purpose of this question is that we are going to use the reduce method. The question is of arrays category and there will be 5 relative questions to this topic. Now flattening an array is basically converting multi-dimensional, maybe 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional array into a single dimensional array. To flatten an array, we have to use the reduce method. We will begin with the basics and then I will discuss the flattening process as a first question in the relative questions section. The reason is you need to know the basics of the reduce method. Like the map method, reduce is also asked in almost all interviews. And the reason is it's very useful in many places. We saw one example in map method about finding square root or length of each element. In all these operations, there is one thing common. If you have 10 elements, there will be 10 results. But let's say I ask you to get the sum of all elements, then it's kind of an aggregate or accumulative operation. That is, the result is combined. So reduce method loops through all the elements and helps you to get one combined result, like sum or other accumulative calculations. For example, product or average. Let's check with an example. I will declare an array, for example, which has 2, 4, 6, 8. That is 4 values we have here. I missed an equal to sign. I'll say let result is equal to array.reduce. Now this method also takes a callback function as an argument. But there is a major difference if you compare with map or for each, and this has a different way to deal with the parameters. Yes, it does have a callback function. The first parameter is the accumulator. Now you name it whatever you want to, but we call this as a kind of accumulator. Why? Because it accumulates all the values in it. Then comes the element value or the current value. We can name it element or current. Let's say I name it current value or just current. This means that every element of array goes to the current variable and accumulator will actually accumulate all the returned values, which I am going to show you in a moment. So we are taking the arrow function. Let's say what I want to return is I want to return whatever is the accumulator. I just want to add the current value in it, right? And just display the result. I'll say console.log and the result I want to display. Let's check what happens. It says 20, right? So accumulator holds the accumulative values. There are other parameters with this. The next parameter is actually the index of the current value, and also it passes the array on which this loop is going, right? So we have these parameters. We also have one more parameter here, not this argument, but this is actually the initial value. Now there is a difference in this. Let's try this also. I'll remove this array and index because at the moment it is not needed, and you can easily understand that if it is needed you can use it wherever you want to, index and array that is. But the initial value is something which we need to discuss. Earlier we did not give any initial value. This initial value parameter is for the accumulator. When it started, the accumulator was 0. And then it started adding 2, 4, 6 and 8. Let's say I initialize the accumulator with 10. Then what will happen? It will give us the result 30 instead of 20. Why? Because this total was anyway has to be 20, but then we initialize the accumulator with 10. So 10 plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8. That's how it has gone. So this parameter is very useful. You may give like this. That means from the beginning, accumulator has become an object literal. If you give like this, only like this, the square brackets, the accumulator becomes an array. So you do take care while you assign the initial value. So we have seen that initial value makes the difference. Let's also practically understand that how this process goes on. So I will just show you the dry run of with and without initial value. When there is no initial value given, this is how the output will be. Let's check the dry run. Accumulator is 0 on the first call. the current value will be 2. Similarly, it goes on like this on second call, on third call, and on the fourth call, we have the current value 8 and the output is 20. If we give this initial value, then the output will look something like this. So now the accumulator will begin with 10 instead of 0. So that's how the initial value works. Now, this is just adding sum. How about getting product? If you want product, the only thing you need to do is just put an asterisk sign here. That is a multiplication sign. And instead of showing the sum, it's going to give you the product of these values. In fact, we can calculate the average as well. Let's say we have 4 elements here and the sum is 20. So the average is actually 20 by total number of elements. So 20 by 4. So the average should be 5. There might be different values, so we will consider array.length as number of elements. How will you count the average here? Let's try that. We have the code. Inside this reduce method, we can put a condition. Now here I'll need the index number and I will take the array also to make sure that, because this function may be part of some other process, right? So I'm passing the array here and that array I'm going to check. For example, if index is equal to array.length minus 1. That means when it reaches to the final stage, I want to return the accumulator by array.length. Now every time your accumulator will have total of new element added to it. So at the end, I want to return, let's say this will have 20. And I'm dividing it by the length, that is 4. So it should return me 5. Now the only thing is, when it comes to adding the value, right? How will you write? You'll say accumulator. Every time add accumulator with the current value. The important point here is it should return the accumulator every time like this, right? So accumulator is returned to the function. So it will have the sum all the times, but here we are not writing plus. We are just adding it separately so that after the last element is added to it, if this condition matches, then we are not going to return only accumulator. Instead, we are going to return the average value. Saving it, let's try this. Clearing the screen. There it is. Just to try one more thing, we can add, let's say 10. Right? So now we will have the sum as 30 and there are 5 elements. So there has to be 6 as an average. So there are various combinations you can try inside the reduce method's call. There is also a reduce write method. The only difference is reduce loops through array from left to right. That is from 0th index to array length minus 1. Whereas reduce write moves right to left. That is, the loop begins with array length minus 1 index and goes till 0th index. Now let's discuss relative questions of this topic. The first question is, which was our main question, how will you flatten an array? That is, for example, we have an array like this, which is a 2-dimensional array, and we want to convert it into single-dimensional array. Let's first of all print this array itself, so you get the idea that this is a 2-dimensional array. So you see that every element itself is an array. Now we want to convert it into a single dimensional array. This is where reduce can be used. So I can say let flattened array. This process is also called as flattening an array, right? We are making it flat. So that's why I just take a variable FARR, that is flattened array is equal to, I'll say array.reduce. Now here I'm going to take the callback function with arrow only. Now there will be 2 parameters as we have discussed. There will be an accumulator and there will be a current value. Alright. Now the only thing you have to do is you just have to say return the accumulator with a concatenate, that is, you want to append the current value in it. That's it. So every time the accumulator will make sure that a new value is added to it with a concat method. Now the only thing remaining is that we just display the flattened array. That's it. So if I run, you get that it is a flattened array. Sometimes we also take care that accumulator is for sure converted into an array. So initializing with a square bracket, that is, we make sure that from the beginning the accumulator is an array. This will also give us the same output. This is a better practice when you are flattening an array. So this is how you flatten an array using the reduce method. The second question is get sum of a key field of an object literal. For example, this is the object literal employees and you want to get salary of all the employees. How will you do this? Let's try in the code window. I have already declared the array here. Let's say let total salary is equal to employees dot reduce. Now again the accumulator and the current value, and I'll put an arrow function. What will it return? Now, as we have seen the syntax, you might be thinking that writing the accumulator, right? And we are adding the current, which is going to be an object literal dot salary, should solve our purpose. Let's see what happens in this case. We will display the total salary. I'll say total salary. See what happens. It has joined all the values. The reason is accumulator is filled with the first element, right? It is initialized with the first element, and every element of this array is an object literal. So accumulator joins the current dot salary. So this itself is an object plus current dot salary. This keeps on going, so we don't get the output. So we have to make sure that the accumulator should be 0 in the beginning. So it's going to handle the numeric operations now, right? So now because we have given 0 as initial value, now let's try and see what happens. Now we have the sum of all the values. So you do have to take care using initial value when you have the object literal especially. The third question is find average of all elements of an array. This we have already seen. This is the code we tried. So this is again an important question to deal with. The fourth question is find sum or maybe product of all elements, which we have seen while understanding the syntax of reduce. The fifth question is what is the difference between reduce and reduce write. So this we discussed that the reduce loops from the 0th element till the last element, whereas reduce write starts the loop from the right side. That's the only difference between these two methods.